I was legit about to tell you about the Pledge of Allegiance.
The Pledge of Allegiance?
Pledge of Allegiance. Because like my son and I, we did a deep dive. I got a call from the school.
Okay.
Saying like, hey, we just want you to be aware that like, Donté Jr. has not been standing for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Wait. So they still do the Pledge of Allegiance?
They still do the Pledge of Allegiance every day.
All right. Is your kid in a public school or a private school?
Public school.
What grade?
So at the time, this was when he was in 5th grade. So this is last year. This is just last year.
So he's in 5th grade and they're still doing the Pledge of Allegiance?
Still
Pledge
doing,
of Allegiance?
still
I thought
doing,
that was out of schools. That's interesting.
Yeah.
But go ahead.
So so I had to explain to his teacher, and he had been doing this the previous year. So she had no idea that he had been doing this for a whole year.
To where he doesn't stand for the Pledge of Allegiance.
He does not stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. And we had a conversation about it. We did a deep dive into why.
Who's we?
He and I, my son and I, and why he didn't want to.
Okay.
And his reasoning was on point.
What was his reasoning?
All right, so I'm gonna get into it. So he was like, I don't fully believe in the Pledge of Allegiance. And I was like, okay, why? He was just like, well, because I don't believe in what it says. And I was like, well, what part of it don't you believe in? Because I was curious. I'm like, okay.
Right.
I'm like, little Kaepernick. We got a little Kaepernick on our hands.
Okay.
And he was like, liberty and justice for all.
Okay.
And it struck a nerve. It hit me hard. I was like, oh, okay. So let's get into it.
All right. We want to welcome y'all to Fathers Handling Business. You just caught us in the middle of a real conversation here. And we're talking about faith in schools. Is it integration or is it overstep? I'm Dwyan Marsh. This is my co-host, Donté Witherspoon. And he's breaking down why his son does not want to say the Pledge of Allegiance in his 5th grade class. What is he, 6th grade now?
He's 6th grade now.
Are they still doing that in 6th grade? In junior high, or is that only elementary school?
You know what? I don't know, because he hasn't mentioned it to me.
He hasn't mentioned it? Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So break down why Donté Jr., right?
Yep.
Donté Jr. does not want to say the Pledge of Allegiance. In 5th grade, this guy's what, 10 years old, 11?
Yeah. So it actually started in 4th grade.
Oh, wow.
So it started in 4th grade, but it wasn't brought to my attention until 5th grade, because his 5th grade teacher was like, she had this whole stance and like, why isn't he standing for the Pledge of Allegiance? That, like, what's going on? Like, she probably thought like, his parent, he'd be taught
Black Power.
Yeah. So I was like, I had to explain to her, like, this is something that he concluded on his own. And as his father, like, I wanted to know the why behind it. So I remember picking him up from school, and I was like, hey, let's have a conversation about why you're not standing for the Pledge of Allegiance. So picked him up. We went to Blaze Pizza, and we sat there for like 2 hours, and we literally dissected word for word the Pledge of Allegiance and its meaning, like the complete meaning. Okay. Right. And so he concluded, there is not liberty and justice for all. And mind you, this is 2 years ago, during the pandemic and during like a lot of the.
So we're saying this is around 2022. So this is after George Floyd. This is after all the racial reckoning, as they call it, racial awakening.
Yeah.
What are they calling it?
All of the above.
Whatever they were calling it in the time between 2020 and about 2023 or so. Yes. Like, this country, the United States of America, kind of went through a racial reckoning. And if you were alive during this time, you would know this already.
Yes.
So go ahead.
And so he is a very empathetic person. He saw all that. Okay. Right? It was everywhere.
He was around 7 in 2020?
And yes. So he's like right around that age. Okay. And so like he's very in tune. He's very aware. Okay. And so he saw all that, and he saw, my son saw that there is not liberty and justice for all. And we died, I was like, well, do you understand what liberty is? Like, right. And he was like, yeah, freedom. Like, right. And so, for him to like want to, know how to articulate why he wasn't, because he couldn't. And that was the thing, like his teacher said, hey, why aren't you standing? And he was, and what he told her was like, because we had this conversation the previous year,
Right.
He couldn't articulate to her why he wasn't standing, but he knew he wasn't going to stand, and it was his right to not stand. And so she wanted to know, and that's why she contacted me.
Got you.
And so I was able to explain to her, like, hey, a year ago, he made this decision on his own that he wasn't going to be standing for the Pledge of Allegiance for this reason. And so I gave her the reason. I told her that, we spent, a few hours dissecting the Pledge of Allegiance and how he felt about it and his experience in the last, during that time, last 3 years, 4 years or whatever. And so she had a better understanding, and her idea was like, well, can he, put together like a PowerPoint presentation and present it to the class?
In fifth grade?
Fifth grade. Yes.
Okay.
And so he did.
Wow.
He did.
Okay.
And so he put together a PowerPoint presentation, and he presented it to his class as to why he does not stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. And it was powerful.
Okay.
And I'm going to tell you how powerful it was. So he broke the Pledge of Allegiance down, its meaning, and its hypocrisies, right? Mm-hmm. And by the end of the presentation, standing ovation, he asked, his classmates questions based on his presentation, and he handed out candy and all that stuff, right?
Were you there?
I was there.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's got to be a proud dad.
The next day. Oh,
that's
absolutely.
That's a proud dad.
The vice principal was in there. Like
that's hard. That's hard. I like that.
And man, it's choking me up right now.
Yeah,
and so the next day, I wanted to know how the next day went, right? Mm-hmm. And so the next day, I said, hey, like, how was school today? Like, during the Pledge of Allegiance. And he was like, and he kind of like played it off all nonchalant, but I was like, I knew it was big. I knew it was big. He was like, oh, it was cool. He was like, yeah, only like 3 people stood.
What?
I was like, what?
Wow. He got them all on their side.
I was like, what? And so, and to his credit, so as he was asking questions, after his presentation, some of the other students raised their hand, and they're like, oh, like, we understand why you don't stand now and why you don't participate in the Pledge of Allegiance. And so some of the other students were like, all right, so like, we understand, like, do we have to stand? Like, cause I'm in agreement with him. Like, there isn't liberty and justice for all. And so the teacher was like, yeah, as long as you can articulate why you're not standing and you're respectful. Right. And so I think that's fair. Like, there's a lot of patriotic people in this country, and I get that, but there's also the other part. And so, like, while you could be patriotic, you can also have an understanding that, the things that are being recited in the Pledge of Allegiance, there's a lot of hypocrisy in it and non-truths to it, right? And so if you're going to break it down,
what's the just so I can know what you mean by non-truths. What are the non-truths?
Well, the end of it, liberty and justice for all, and then my son also brought up, the part about God, right? And so
what part, or what was the point?
That we've taken God out of school. We've taken God out of school, and so you're having a pledge. Indivisible, with liberty and justice, one nation under God, right?
Okay.
So he was explaining that, we're one nation under God, but you've taken God out of schools. Yeah, we're one nation, but we have 2 major political parties that are separated, literally dividing the country, dividing the nation. Mm-hmm. And so for a 5th grader to bring this up, and to shed light, in his classroom and to give understanding to his classmates, that was huge. And I think the the huge part about that is not even the political part, but the God part about taking, like, you've taken God, and he did the research, and it was like you took God out, you took prayer out, because I don't know if you guys remember, they took prayer out of school, they took the Bible out of school.
Correct.
Right. So thus taking God out of school.
So just to give the historical context. So prayer in public schools officially removed by the U.S. Supreme Court in 1962 and 1963 through two key rulings, Engel versus Vitale and Abington School District versus Shemp. These decisions prohibited state-mandated prayer and Bible reading in public schools, citing the First Amendment.
There you have it.
So up until 1963, there was state-mandated prayer. And obviously the Pledge of Allegiance was part of that as well. But, you had to pray in public schools. And then they took that out.
Yeah.
So go ahead.
Yeah. So, I mean, like you said, proud dad moment, of course. But then also, like, I was just proud of him for willing to get up in front of his classmates and to share his heart behind why he wasn't standing for the Pledge of Allegiance, to shed light on the truth of the Pledge of Allegiance and its hypocrisies within it. And then to show like a sign of leadership.
Yeah, that's dope.
Yeah. And his classmates follow suit. Like, they were like, nah, it was like the equivalent of like, we taking a knee.
Right. My man was Kaepernick up in there.
Yeah.
That's wow. Donté Kaepernick, huh? Donté Cap. Oh man, I can't wait to meet that young man.
Yeah.
That's wow. I mean, so I agree with you on that standpoint, that I'm about the fatherhood part of it. Just being a father and seeing your kids stand up to the hypocrisies and calling it out. And I think that's the same thing that Kaepernick wanted to do, was to speak to the hypocrisies and start taking us towards, living up to what it says. And so I'll push back a little bit because, I do believe that, integrating faith-based teachings can enrich the moral and spiritual development of our kids. Obviously they took it out in 63, and we can see how much, death and destruction has happened in our schools.
Yeah.
The school shootings before and the school shootings after are, night and day. But, in Deuteronomy 6:7, it talks about teaching God's commands to our children.
Yep.
Like that was literally the first introduction to schools, like why they even made schools, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And it was for the kids to be able to actually read, the Torah, the commandments, you know what I'm saying? Before that, it was just the rabbi, like as we saw in The Chosen, the rabbi would just read the scriptures to you. Right. And it was more of an oral communication of the scriptures.
You're just listening.
Then once now we got paper and paper mill and blah, blah, blah. So now we have Bibles and blah, blah, blah. So actually you want them to be able to read it for themselves. So that was kind of the original reason when they started the schools. And then the business corporations wanted to create factory workers. And so that's really why we have schools in the first place. Like, if you really think about it, there's no other place in society where you sit in a row, right, behind other people, and you listen to somebody speak about something, one subject for an hour, and then go to another subject for another hour, and then another subject for another hour.
Right.
And I mean, they built it to mirror factories. So that's really why we have schools. Like back in the day, people didn't go to schools. They would just learn what they need to learn real quick. And then they would go out into the field, because most people were agriculture and farmers and, you know what I'm saying, things of that nature. So you would just go into your field. There was no but that's another story.
You're speaking some truth right now.
That's another story for another day.
Y'all ready for that. Y'all not ready for
that's
that.
That's another story for another day. But, in having schools, one of the things that we had was prayer in schools. And, you know, obviously they took that out. And so it's a complex issue. We talked about the historical things. You know, we talked about young Donté Jr. like, nah, man, nah. But I do want to point to the fact that hypocrisy is just a part of human nature.
Yeah.
And so sometimes, you know, we have to say things that may not be true right now, but we are saying them so that they can be true. And I commend him for bringing that up, you know, but also we want to be careful because we understand that while it's not true right now, we want it to be true. We want it to be one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
That is the hope and prayer.
That is the hope and prayer. But if you really think about it, back in the 60s, before that and all that kind of stuff, the liberty and justice that I have today in 2024 is not the same liberty and justice that my great grandfather had. I can probably even just say my grandfather had. Even my mom was around when Dr. King and Martin Luther King, sorry, Dr. King and Martin Luther King, Dr. King and Malcolm X were murdered. Right. So she was alive during that time. She told me about a time when she's from Chicago. And so she told me about a time when the only restaurant that they were allowed to go to was the Muslim restaurant ran by Elijah Muhammad in Chicago. And she said that was the time when they dressed up, right? And so I was reading Malcolm X autobiography, right? And he was just talking about how Elijah Muhammad had Chicago on lock, Detroit on lock, and they had these restaurants, right? And I was just telling my mom about it. She was like, oh yeah. She said, Daddy, which is my grandfather, we call him Daddy. Daddy used to take us to that. And there were 7 of them. So, well, 9 of them, grandma, grandfather, and then 7 kids. She was like, Daddy used to take us to that restaurant that Elijah Muhammad had because that was the only nice restaurant that they could go to. Right. And she was like, yeah, we used to have to dress up and, you know, they used to be serving us and yes, sir, no, sir. And they taught us how to use the knives and the, you know, just all that. Right.
Wow.
One restaurant in all of Chicago that, you know, a black family could actually go into and be treated with respect, right?
Dignity,
liberty, and justice,
Yeah.
right? So we're talking about in my mother's lifetime, not even my grandfather. We're talking about my mother's lifetime. And to fast forward to now, you know, in my lifetime, in my kids' lifetime, we definitely have more liberty and more justice.
Bro. Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Can we agree on that?
Absolutely. Yeah.
So, you know, sometimes we have to set the thermometer, right? I'm sorry, not the thermometer, the thermostat. Sometimes we have to set the thermostat. Sometimes it's 58 degrees in here, but we gonna set it to 70.
Yeah.
Even though it's not 70 right now, you know, we're believing that it's gonna get there. And so, you know, sometimes we have to, you know, remind people like, yo, we don't have liberty and justice yet. But we still gonna say this because this is what we're believing to have, you know, so.
Yeah, I mean, I understand the concept and, you know, positive speaking, and I get it. And then I also get, because I mean, I said the Pledge of Allegiance all throughout school without even thinking twice about it. You know, it was just the thing that you did.
I said it in elementary. Yeah. I remember.
And so, you know, I did all those things. So it was my son who shed the light. He was able to see the things that are going on in our world, and he was able to comprehend at a very early age, and understand and show empathy. And it's like, no, this ain't right, and speak up on it. Like, so my question to you is, do you think that faith-based teachings could be benefited in public schools? Could benefit public schools? 1,000%.
Okay. So how can schools include religious education while also respecting all beliefs?
Well, I think it boils down to going to And then you're talking about public school.
We're talking strictly about
public school?
About public schools, because private schools you're paying for, and so whatever the private school is doing, you're paying for. In public schools, we pay with taxes, but it's different, right? Like let's not get semantic here. Like we know it's different. Like we're paying with taxes, but it's different when you go to a private school. Like first of all, when you go to a private school, you have to be admitted. Right? You know what I'm saying? Like you just can't go. Like they actually have to admit you, and what the curriculum is, what they're teaching. It's usually a Christian school or a Catholic school or et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah.
Right? For most public schools.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, for private schools. Yeah. But for public schools, that's just a legality that, you got to send your kids to school. So
send us here. Send them here.
Right.
With us.
So, how can we, respect all the beliefs, but also still include, one nation under God. So basically this country was built under God. So if you live in this country, you can have your beliefs, but according to the Constitution, according to, the Pledge of Allegiance, we're one nation under God.
Yeah. I think, to get around all the red tape and to respect all religions while being in public school, the only way to get around it is for the students to drive it through clubs. And so really and truly, it's the only way, because they're not going to have the teachers teach it.
Correct.
It's not going to be a part of the curriculum.
Correct.
And so it has to be student driven. And so what does that mean? It means us as parents who call ourselves believers, Christ followers, we need to be doing our jobs at home with our kids, training our children up, right?
Right.
And so if we are going to expect our kids to follow suit, then we need to start at infancy, right? Training them up so that they can go out into the public schools and be the only Bible that some kids may ever only see, right?
So let's talk about the clubs. So in my church, they have this thing called Jesus Clubs. I believe that's what it's called. I could be incorrect, but Jesus Clubs, what they do is they go out to the different high schools. It's youth in our church, and they go out to the different high schools, and they lead these clubs during lunch, during whatever. Okay, cool. So now we do have Jesus Clubs in Southern California, in some schools, right? Usually student led, right? So then we also have Wiccan clubs and the satanic clubs as well, because if we're being fair to all religions, right? Like there are devil worshipers, there are satanic worshipers of Baal, Baal, like they are there. And so they should have their right to worship as well. So what is your view on opposing views? I mean, let's just talk about those two clubs right there. We have the Jesus Club and then we have the Satan Club, the Satanic Club.
What's my view? My view is this is why we have so much division in the world. It's literally like the complete opposite. Literally night and day.
It is night and day.
Like light and dark.
It is night and day. But I think it's important, and this is just my view, I think it's important to have opposing views, because a lot of times opposing views can expose the truth. The
inconsistencies, right?
It can expose the truth, so if you're standing on, like, I don't have to believe what you believe for me to listen to you, right? And understand where you're coming from, right? And then you can listen to me and, you can understand where I'm coming from, right? And we don't have to argue. We don't got to fight about it, but you can share your belief. I can share my belief, and that's kind of how we can have a healthy conversation. Yeah. Right.
Tell that to
I'm gonna stop right
okay.
You said tell it to what?
I was going to say tell that to a Democratic and a strong Democratic and a strong Republican.
So having healthy opposing arguments having opposing arguments and listening to opposing arguments is healthy in my opinion. And you were saying something about, the Democrats or
I was saying, like, I mean, tell that to a strong Democratic and strong Republican, they'd be want to tear each other's heads off with their views. Like to have opposing political parties listening to each other's,
right. But I think a lot of that, as viewers, we look at it as they're going at each other, but a lot of it is just theatrics. It's just acting. Like a lot of them are lawyers, right? Most of them are lawyers, and most of them, as a lawyer, and I'm not a lawyer, but I know a few. As a lawyer, you have to know how to debate both sides of the argument.
Oh yeah,
right. And so whether you believe it or not, you have to be prepared to, debate an argument. You know what I'm saying? Whichever side, you are picked to be on. And, we don't have a lot of debate teams. And I think everybody should be a part of a debate team growing up, just because it gives you the chance to look at the opposing view, right? Regardless of how you feel about it.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? And I think that's a lot of things that gets lost is like, when we watch these Republican debates or Democratic debates or them going against each other, we put our feelings in it because of how we feel about what they're talking about. A lot of times they don't even have their feelings in it. Yeah. You know what I'm saying? Because they're kissing and hugging backstage. You know what I'm saying? Or they'll go after each other on stage, like it'll be when they're doing like the Democratic primaries or the Republican primary, they'll go at each other on stage, and then once they lose, they're like, I'm throwing my support behind so-and-so. You know what I'm saying? So were they really emotionally involved in it? No.
Yeah.
I mean, it's theater, it's theatrics. So having those opposing views, let's just say there is a devil worshiping crew in school, and then there's a Jesus crew in school. I mean, I know a lot of people cringe, but I think that's dope, because I think that, for one, I'm really about tell me where you stand, right? Because I know how to deal with you. Like, if you're a racist, let me know. You know what I'm saying? Like that's okay. You know what I'm saying? That you're a racist. You know what I'm saying? It's not okay that you're a racist, but it's okay in the sense that let me know where you stand. Don't try to be sneaky about it. You know what I'm saying? Let me know where you stand so that I know how to deal with you accordingly.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? Like, that's just letting me be able to deal with you. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So having those opposing views, like when I was growing up, my mom made me research occults, right? I had a whole book of just different cults and different occults. And, as a teenager, I read a bunch of them, but there's one occult who their tagline was, "Come on, ma, burn your bra." And so I'm 15, so I'm like, what is this? What religion is this? Ma, why we not in this religion? Like, it was about, it was about the liberation of women,
being free
and being free, and
free the titties. Can we say titties?
Free the nipple.
Free the nipple.
You know what I'm saying? And as a teenager, I was like, I'm down with this. I'm down with this religion, because, you know what I'm saying, they talking about making sure that the nipples are free. You know what I'm saying? We don't got to cover them up. You know what I'm saying? We don't got to, women ain't got to wear bras. You know what I'm saying? Just as a young man, that was my, that's the one I remember for sure, right off the top of my head. But I did study a bunch of different cults, and, the main thing that I got from it was, a lot of religions and cults and whatever you want to call them are based around themselves, based around, hedonism. Really, what all religions is about is like, I'm going to tell God how I'm going to worship you, whatever God that is. You know what I'm saying? I'm gonna do it this specific way, or, these women can't do this, or they have to wear these long dresses, or they got to cover their face, or they got to do this, or they got to do that, based on my opinion of what I think God wants, And so it's a good education to have, in my opinion, if we're strictly talking about bringing religious practices into school and allowing them, because they do allow them, but they don't push them.
Right.
You know, so how do we respond to concerns about violating the separation of church and state?
I don't know. Like, can you like what can you do about it other than like put it on our kids?
Put it on our kids in what way?
Like allowing them to lead as opposed to not doing anything and not educating our kids to just stay silent. Like, oh, like religion, or like, sharing your faith is not allowed, so don't do it. It is allowed for kids to do it. So it's
but the administration, the teachers cannot do it in this current environment that we are in. Correct.
So really and truly, it's about, for me, it really has to be it has to be something that your kid wants to do. It's not about pushing any type of agenda into the schools through your kids. It's about like, hey, like, you have a right to share your faith if you want to. And if you want to, here's how you can do it. So teaching them how they can, if that's what they choose to do, if that's what they want to do. Some kids are very strong about their faith and they want to share their faith openly. And I don't see anything wrong with that, right? And on the same token, it's just like you, and you're teaching your kids about discipleship, like, by doing that. But I think it's something that they would have to want to do in order for it to be like a successful thing and ongoing, because at some point your kid is going to leave the school. And so
this is true.
Right. And like, if someone else doesn't take the reins, then it falls apart. It doesn't, it ceases to exist. So yeah, I think it boils down to, putting it on the kids who actually want to do that or want to share their faith in school and have a voice in that way.
Okay. So let's just speak on morality for a second. Faith teachings can provide moral grounding and character development, which is, lacking. Argumentatively, you could say that is lacking in secular education. So if we don't have prayer in schools, we don't have religious teachings in schools, how do we install morals into our children while they're being educated?
Yeah,
is that even the responsibility of the school? Like, do we even put that on? Because we said, not in this podcast, but earlier in a different podcast, we talked about how much time our children are in these schools, whether public or private.
The influence that they have.
The influence that they have, either public or private, they're in school for at least 8 hours. Let's just say 8 hours just to keep it round, because they got to get there. They got to get to their class. They may have sports. They may have after school activities. Yeah. Minimum 6 hours, but
So they have the influence of,
1/3 of the day.
Their teachers, their friends who come from many different backgrounds, from all these people outside of their actual home, and and how they're being raised by their parents. So so your question is,
how do we instill the morals, or how do we not even instill the morals, because I believe that's a home thing.
Yes.
But how do we, for the people who aren't getting it at home, right? Like, how are we teaching the morals? Like, what is the moral grounding point? What is if there's no religion in school, there's no God in schools. I know there's one nation under God, but that's the only thing that they teach, right? About God. Okay. So what is the moral grounding, or the basis that we have for our kids?
I think most schools have their own. I know for
public schools.
Yeah. So like for my daughter's elementary public school, they're very big on kindness.
Okay.
So, they got it painted all over the school. Kindness counts, and be kind. So their whole moral value spiel, if you will, is about kindness, right? Which is it's great.
And do they base that on anything, or they're just saying kindness is just the way to be?
I think they base it on it's just the way to be, because it's not attached to any type of religion, if you will.
Right.
I think they were very careful with the wording, that they used, and it's something that we should all embody as one, as a human, human society, human beings. Like, we should all be kind to one another. And I think it encompasses everyone. I think that's, where they were going with that.
Okay. So kindness can be part of the curriculum. Is it a part of the curriculum, or is it just part of? Oh, okay.
Yeah, it is.
Okay, nice.
So
do they have any type of clubs or extracurricular? Because I know this is just elementary school that you're talking about, right? So do they have any kind of clubs or after school activities or?
No, I mean, I think they incorporate it in their classrooms, and then they have like a kindness week where they send home a paper and try and do like one of these, kind acts of kindness throughout the week or whatever. And so they list a whole bunch of different acts of kindness. And they encourage the students to do that throughout the week.
And so this is based off of the school. So the school is doing this on their own, basically.
Yeah, the school is doing this on their own. Yep.
Interesting.
And I would assume that other public schools would, incorporate something of the nature in their schools as well.
That would be good to know.
Yeah.
Please let us know. Like, are public schools actually implementing this kindness rule, or what are the moral backgrounds or the moral things that they're trying to teach the kids in these schools? I would like to know how they're doing across the country. Like what else are they doing? Like, how are they instilling morals into our kids? In this public school age, when there's no religious teachings, not necessarily saying that there has to be a religious teaching, but, it's supposed to be one nation under God, according to the Constitution and the Pledge of Allegiance. So,
but what I do want to point out, though, is kindness is one of the fruit of the spirits.
Correct.
I don't know if they know that, but I know that.
Correct. Right. So that's what I'm saying. Like, obviously that's a characteristic of love, is kindness.
Yeah.
And God is love, obviously. So, that's a characteristic that they're kind of just like, this is kindness. We don't know where we got this from, or we're not going to tell you where we got this from.
Right.
But
we know where it's from.
Right.
I mean, if you think about the moral compass as a whole, it's from the Bible.
Correct.
It's from the Bible.
Correct.
And so if you think about like the rules and regulations, even that we have to abide by, like, it's wrong to steal. It's wrong to kill. It's like, where do you think that comes from? It comes from the Ten Commandments. Like, so the moral compass is from the Bible. And for you to like say like, oh, well, we can't practice these things in the public schools. Like, we've taken God out of the public schools. Like, it's like, did you really though? Like, and so like, why try to hide it? Like, just embrace it. Like, because it's good.
Well, if they embraced it, then it would be not diversity and inclusion.
Yeah, if you slap the Christian name on it,
right?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, it wouldn't encompass every religion, but I mean, I'm gonna call a spade a spade.
Yeah. So what can we take away from this? What are we saying here? Are we saying that, religious education or godlike morality should start in the home?
Absolutely.
Correct. It's not in the schools anymore.
Right.
Correct. And we are seeing the fruits of that, right? Because
Or the lack thereof.
or the lack thereof, because I mean, you brought up a great point about, you know, in elementary school and your kids in elementary school, they preach kindness, they got kindness everywhere, et cetera, et cetera. But is that really everywhere? Is that something that's actually being taught everywhere?
Right.
You know what I'm saying? Like, to
Please let us know.
To me, that sounds like a special situation.
Yeah.
Because I've never seen that before. You know, when my kids went to elementary school, I didn't see that. Right. I know that they taught, you know, different kind of stuff, but, you know, like, what are the teachers teaching? You know what I'm saying? And by the time they get to middle school, you know, do they still have that moral compass?
I don't think so.
like, you know,
I think these middle school kids are on a whole different level.
So is the solution to reintroduce faith and godlike morality into the schools? And if we can't do that, what's the solution?
Yeah, I think it boils down to, again, us. You know, like us in the homes.
Fathers.
We have to do our part in raising our kids. Like, if you're a dad and you have a child, whether they live with you or not, like, I really urge you to be a part of their lives. Like, it is so, so important. You have a lot to give just by being there. Just by being there. And so if you have the opportunity to be a part of your kids' lives, don't let this time go by to where you haven't had an impact when you could have.
Yeah.
It's very important.
And I'll go back to what I said earlier in Deuteronomy 6:7, which talks about, you know, teaching God's commands to your children. That's so very important. You know, we definitely want them to, you know, learn and study and on their own, but they're only going to do what we do. Mm-hmm. I mean, at the end of the day, you know, they're either going to do what we do or do the exact opposite of what we do.
Yeah.
You know, like, if your dad was an alcoholic, you either are an alcoholic or you don't even touch alcohol.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Like, obviously not every single case, but most cases and most kids, especially boy children, you know, they either want to be just like their dad or they want to be the total opposite of their pops. It
all depends on the situation, the environment that they grew up in, and their experience. Yep. Yeah.
It's the influence.
So what type of, and you know it, and like us being Christian men and followers of Christ, don't let that deter you, or like, you know, you are who you are, and be okay with that. Like, you can still have, no matter, like, take religion out of it. Like, you can still have a positive impact on your child's life by being a part of it. Like, influence is key, right? And so
and you're influencing whether you know it or not.
Yeah.
Whether you do it actively influencing or inactively, you're influencing them. So
because more is caught than taught. More is caught than taught.
Preach, brother, preach. More is caught than taught. Break that down. What does that mean? More is caught than taught.
You can tell your kids to do a certain thing, but they're going to do what they see. And so whatever they catch you doing, like, that's what they're more apt to do. And so I was joking around with my son the other day. I was like, man, I know that, because I do things that are not right sometimes, like text and drive. And so, and my son, you know, he's in the front seat, he's watching me.
Right.
And more is caught than taught. I'm like, look, I know I need to do a better job at not texting and driving.
Right.
And so, like I
or
just
be a better texter and driver.
And so I tell him this, like, I'm like, do not, like, once you start driving, he tells me all the time, like, get off your phone, Dad. Like,
Dang.
yeah, he tells me all
head,
yeah, he's on me. And so he knows, but also more is caught than taught. So like, I also know that even though he knows that I'm not supposed to be texting and driving, and I know that I'm not supposed to be texting and driving, he's seeing me text and drive. And so once he gets to that age where he like, and we already know that the phone is such a huge distraction. Like, it's like, oh, I can't live without my phone.
Right.
Like, I get a text like, oh, I got to see who it is. Like, he's going to remember me texting and driving. And so I need to do it. So you
still have 6 years left, at least, before he starts driving, right? Somewhere around there.
Yeah. Well, how old is he? He's about to be 12.
Oh, he's about to be 12.
Month.
So you got 4 years left. Mm-hmm. So you can change that narrative.
I got to change my habits.
You got to change your habits. You can change that narrative to where he sees you actually not texting and driving and maybe just using the hands free.
Yeah.
Using the hands.
I have to have a better influence on my kid's life while driving.
Yeah. I used to drive a lot with my knees.
I'll be eating.
And my kids used to be like, "How are you doing that? How are you driving without hands, Dad?" Like, I've never seen anybody drive with their knees. And you know what's so funny is I learned how to drive with my knees because I saw my friend's father do that when we used to go on trips. Used to go on fishing trips with him, and he used to always be driving with his knees.
Yep.
I'm like, yo, that's dope. So when I drive with my knees. Like,
you know why I drive with my knees? Because I saw my dad do it.
Exactly. So like you said, more is caught than taught. Like, he didn't teach me how to drive with his knees, but he taught me by doing it.
Yeah.
And so, our habits, are going to be picked up. They're either going to be embraced or repelled.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Like the habits that they don't like from us, they're going to try to go the opposite way.
Right.
They're going to try to repel. And it's interesting because they don't have any context around what we do.
Right.
They just know that we do it. You know what I'm saying? And so we have to definitely be careful and, have conversations, why we're doing what we're doing. And just be cognizant of those type of things because they pick it up. Mm-hmm. They pick it up. More is caught than taught. I like that one. Yeah. Well, cool, man. So talked about a lot today. We kind of just jumped into the conversation, which was kind of dope. I actually like that. And so just talking about, I don't want to say religion because religion is man-made, but just God in schools, right? God in school, faith in schools, morality in schools. And as always, we want to know what you think. Let me know if I'm tripping. Let me know if he's tripping. He's definitely tripping. But let me know if I'm tripping in the comments. Let me know what you've seen in your schools around wherever you are, as far as, how they're implementing morality in schools. Are they still doing the Pledge of Allegiance? Because I didn't even know that they were still doing that, to be honest with you. And, how they can, what are the best practices? You know what I'm saying? What should we be doing? What can we do? When we talk about groups, because if you let one group in, you got to let all the groups in. Me personally, I think that that's great. I think that is a great learning tool to see what the other side is doing. You know what I'm saying? Sometimes you got to see what the other side is doing to be like, y'all doing that? Yeah. Nah, y'all tripping. You know what I'm saying? Just to be able to know what they're doing, because a lot of times we're just speculating what the other side is doing. Right. You know what I'm saying? But actually going to those groups, seeing what they're doing, seeing, how they do it, Yeah. And, it can definitely strengthen your truth. I know it did for me when I was reading about different cults. It definitely strengthened my truth because I was just reading it like, y'all doing this? Except for the burn your bra stuff. That was one thing that I did. No, I was playing. But like I said, let us know your thoughts. We appreciate you checking us out. This is Fathers Handling Business. I'm Dwyan Marsh.
Donté, be sure to join us next time. Till next time.
Peace.